Welcome back to the Meaningful and Messy podcasts. I'm Esty Webster, your host, and today I'm going to be talking about one of my near and dear topics to my heart that I love talking about, which is making friends and making ourselves available for the connections that we want in life, and looking at the ways that we may be inhibiting ourselves a little bit there. This is a very dear topic to me because I've always resonated with this. So I've always resonated with the feeling of aloneness, right? So life experiences, until throughout my adult years. I'm 35 now, but I think as long as I could remember, I would feel that way, from a young age. So this has always been something that I've explored and really in my mid 20s started to dive into and really want to understand like what creates the feeling of loneliness. I realized in my mid 20s, I was pretty lonely and I didn't really have that many friends. I didn't necessarily know the social support that I needed. I just knew that I needed something else outside of myself. And it took a lot of self-reflection to understand that like I was helping contribute to a lot of that for myself. And it wasn't an easy road. It wasn't always easy to see myself as like a source of like, how am I keeping myself from the connection that I really want? But I've learned over the years with a lot of therapy, a lot of reflection of other people, through a lot of different healing avenues, that there's a way that we can create that reality for ourselves a lot of the time. And it's good news because we can then understand more of how we can get what we want in life and not have to be trapped in that place. So a little bit of my background, I have always been a very emotionally in tune, playful, was a playful kid. As far back as I can remember, I was always kind of a little bit of an outcast, always a little bit on the fringes, like only child, didn't necessarily know how to be socially proper or I was socially awkward. So I remember kind of acting out in certain ways from a young age to get attention or to make connections with people. And I just remember, it never was super easy for me. It's not that I didn't have friends at all. I had friends here and there. I just never really felt like I could navigate, normal friendships for my age. I remember this from elementary school. So, I always kind of felt like the loner a little bit. And I felt very close with my family, my mom, my grandma, my aunt. We felt, I felt supported and close with them. They were kind of like my best friends. And so I just remember deeply resonating with feeling like I'm a loner. I'm kind of just on my own, from a young age. I kind of just operated that way naturally. I remember, starting middle school, middle school's rough for everybody, right? That's when a lot of bullying started to happen. I started to experience a lot of drama with people. I remember being friends with, this group of girls who, they were kind of the cool girls, and I enjoyed being friends with them, and I would notice they would be really nasty to other people and talk about them. And I remember just I don't think these people are my real friends. Basically was yeah, I'm gonna leave this group. I'm gonna turn against them. And that's when even more drama started, these campaigns against me and whatever else that kids do. And I felt like it just increased and got worse, more and more. I was always feeling bullied, feeling like I wanted to leave class, feeling like the world was ganged up on me. I started going to the guidance counselor regularly. I started seeing a therapist regularly. This was about 12 years old, 11, 12 years old. I started seeing a therapist regularly because my mom really wanted me to feel emotionally taken care of. And I remember I stopped at a certain point. I just refused to go back to school. I was I don't want to be there. I don't feel comfortable here. I don't resonate with these people who are my age, my peers. I just felt like an alien. I felt like an outcast. Like I'm just not a part of these people. I don't fit in with people. And that was a very strong statement that I, took on, and a personality that I took on. Unfortunately, I ended up being like truant, ended up having, leaving school essentially, got enrolled in a homeschooling program. This was around the start of ninth grade. And I enrolled in a home program to finish high school. And I finished it not well. I, basically fumbled my way through it, didn't get a great high school education, didn't have the socialization very well. I remember I was kind of just at home online, chatting with people in mental health communities and all kinds of different communities, usually adults. I had this like mantra that I get along well with adults. I don't get along well with kids or anyone my age. And I remember feeling at like 14, 15, like I'm an old person. I'm not a young person. I just felt old, and I felt tired, and I felt emotionally exhausted. So yeah, I kind of missed that socialization. And so that impacted my development and connections with other people. I went, off to college, met friends here and there. So, I mean, I've always had it in me to want to be social and to be, to love humor and laughing with people, joking around. So it's not like I didn't have like friends here and there, but I didn't truly know how to have long-lasting, deep connections, like how to actually rely on other people and have them rely on me, and to really open up, and I think that wasn't something that I discovered until I was about 25, 24. I started kind of searching again and realizing, I'm pretty independent. Like I'm pretty much a loner. That's how I go through life. And I was lonely. I was very painfully lonely. And I was like, I need to find more connection. And so I actually found these things in Austin. I mentioned them before, and I will always talk about them. I went to a lot of different meetups, things like that. But these things were called authentic relating games. So you go and you talk about connection. So you talk about, your feelings, you say the things that normally would be more awkward to say, or that people don't say, you say those things, and you get to play with showing up that way with people, and you get to experiment with showing up in a different kind of way than you see in an everyday social setting. Pardon me, what a burp. So you get to experience that kind of thing there, and I realized it really fed something deep inside me, and I was like, this is where I need to be. This is amazing. Whatever this is, I want more of these kind of connections in my life. Long story short, started going to that, found a community, a whole group of people who were into this kind of stuff. My lease was up and I needed to move, so I went ahead and moved into this community home, commune, whatever you want to call it, I think there were 10 people in the house at the time, but the house was centered on connection and really centered on personal growth. And hey, we're going to say things to each other. Sometimes we're going to tell each other the truth. We're going to practice being honest, all these things. And it really was mind blowing to me, and it really deeply nourished something inside me. I remember hearing, like people, I felt seen by people in a way I had never felt seen before. I remember people giving me reflections about myself, like, you're very deep feeling, and you really understand yourself. You really understand other people. And I had always known that about myself, and it was really great to be seen in that way. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. And I also had reflections back from people at times where they were like, you're hard to tell the truth to sometimes, or you're kind of like resistant and bratty to hearing things. And I'm like, what? Like, it blew my mind, because I was like, I am not this way. I'm super open-minded and super open to hearing feedback about myself. And the reality was I was not. It was very difficult. And I had painted a picture of myself to myself that I was super self-aware. I knew everything about myself. Nobody could tell me anything. And the reality was I boxed myself in, and I was limiting myself greatly, because I thought that I I have this know-it-all mindset that like, I already know myself super well. What can other people tell me? When in reality, you can't fully see yourself without the mirror of other people. You can't fully see everything, the way you show up in relationship, the things that relationships bring out of you, and the things that connection brings out of you. You don't see that by being solo and by living like an island to yourself. You're going to be able to see a lot about yourself. You're going to be able to self-reflect, do a lot of inner work. I do a lot of inner work solo at times, and that's where we really do grow, when we are with ourselves. But without the friction and the antagonist of relationships, we're not going to be able to fully understand ourselves. So essentially, moving into this house, going to these kind of connection events, learning to connect in these deeper ways and to realize how nourishing it was, ultimately was showing me where I was deficient in these areas and where I needed to actually learn to open myself up more, and how much. It's almost like the phrase, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. I realized how much I did not know how to connect with people, and how uncomfortable it was, and how I even realized I can use these connection skills and tools as even like a shield to, like, I can hide myself over here. I can show up in these layers and use this language to show up, but I'm really just hiding in the background, right? So this kind of exposing myself to this kind of stuff really helped me understand that, like, I needed a lot of healing, and there was a lot that I needed to work within myself in order to have the connection that I wanted. I really carried that identity of being this bullied girl and like this victim to the world since I was little. And that really colored and painted the way I was showing up in relationships. My biggest mantra used to be, I am not able to be understood by others. And I specifically remember a time when I was leaving, I think the 8th grade, I was leaving my public school, and the assistant principal, I remember her kind of standing with my mom and I and saying, like, I just don't understand why you're doing what you're doing, why you're leaving. I don't get it. I don't understand what you're doing. And I just remember, like, the feeling of, like, man, like, I'm in pain, and I don't want to be bullied, and I don't want to have this drama with other people, and I'm in so much pain, and I don't know what to do. My mom doesn't know what to do. We don't know how to handle this. And to have someone in the face of that just say, I don't understand you, and I remember I took that on very strongly and carried that with me, and that used to live very strongly inside me, that, like, people aren't going to understand me. I'm too weird. I'm too strange. And when we carry those mantras with us from a young age, and we believe them, it soaks into our belief system, into our body, into our very being. We unconsciously will create that experience for ourselves over and over in life, and we will invite those experiences more. We will look for evidence everywhere we can to justify the fear and the belief that we're carrying. Like, I can't be understood. We're going to perceive every little slight, every little detail, look or word or tone in people's voice to support the evidence that we cannot be understood. And so, it's very powerful. I think it's good to be aware of those things, because once we're aware, we can work with it, and we can say, hey, like, maybe like a lot of what I'm seeing from people is not actually me being rejected or me feeling not seen. Maybe I'm not allowing myself to be seen. So this kind of like took some time for it to click for myself, because that was always something that I wanted growing up, was to be seen, to feel understood. Those are my two favorite things. Ask anyone who knows me now. If I feel seen, understood by somebody, that's the best feeling in the world to me, for someone to understand where I'm coming from. And I held to those beliefs very strongly. So I focused on putting myself in situations where I could be seen more. I was like, okay, well, let me go to these events and let me be around these kind of people who are into this deep connection and these kind of things, because I realized, the loneliness I feel, a lot of that might be external. It might be because I don't have the regular social circles and the connection in my life, and it also is happening internally. So I focused on the external a lot. I was like, okay, let me expose myself. I'm a person, you ask any of my friends, I'm a person who is always going out. If I'm feeling like, lonely, like I need more connection, I will go out to groups. I will put myself in social situations. And I did that for a long time. I also realized over time that while this was also good, I still wasn't having the deeper connection that I really wanted in my life. And I wasn't getting nourished in that way completely. And so, in the last 6-7 years, I started to develop those deeper friendships and to spend more one-on-one time with people. I remember feeling like whenever I'm in a group, it seems like everyone else connects with each other and I'm kind of more on the surface level. And I realized, well, I'm not actually connecting with people one-on-one. I'm not really taking the time to spend time with these people and to let them know I want to get to know them. That was another big thing that I had to learn was what are you signaling to other people? Are you signaling like, I want to get to know you, I want more connection with you? What are you doing to signal that to others so that they understand that? Because we're not mind readers. We need other people to communicate with us. And there's a lot of ways to communicate. You can communicate with body language, with the way you ask questions, the conversation you make. There's a lot of intentional things we can do to help invite that connection. So, I had to learn that I need to, when I'm sitting in a group, if I'm feeling lonely or left out, I realized I've been sitting kind of watching, hanging back the whole time, because this was kind of the first phase of me learning connection. Was I would show up to the group, but I wouldn't necessarily be participating. I wouldn't necessarily be showing up or making myself known. That's the thing with wanting to be seen and wanting to be understood, is if we don't actually speak and we don't actually make our truths known, people aren't going to know us. How can people know you if you're not actually speaking and letting them understand you? So this was kind of my first big, hurdle to get over, and to realize I need to show up. It's not enough to just show up physically. I need to actually show up and be involved. So the feeling of never feeling like people knew me was big for me to realize, if you want people to know you, you have to make yourself known. You have to let yourself be known. The awesome thing about the connection groups that I was in, we would talk about hey, this is how I like to be seen. This is how I like people to understand me. And those are very powerful things to talk about, prompts, even just that prompt, to ask someone, because the reality is a lot of people are unconscious to this area. They're unconscious to, they want attention, they want connection in a particular way, but they don't necessarily know how to name it. And they don't even know what that is. They just know they want something and there's something missing. So I think really self-reflecting and understanding yourself first and foremost is the way to really, break ground there, and to understand if I want other people to understand me more, I need to understand myself, and I need to understand my needs and wants and desires first. So self-reflection is really great. I think that being specific, learning to be specific, do I need more social support? Do I need more one-on-one support? Do I want more in-person hangouts with people? Do I want more phone calls? Do I want more text messages? Do I need, what do I need to ask for from others? What do I desire from others? And I think that all of these are very important questions to ask. I think there's a lot of ways to look at, for example, loneliness, because for me, that was my other mantra, is that I'm alone, I'm lonely, and even over the years, now that I have solid friendships and I have a regular social circle, I'm prioritize seeing my friends regularly, I still struggle with that internal feeling in my being. Usually after I have a great day with friends, or I have people over for board games, or I leave my connection with my friends, and I still go into that feeling within myself where I'm like, I am lonely, I'm alone. And I can recognize that is not, I can recognize the feeling and the thought that's there and the truth. And both can be true. I can hold both and realize there's something in me that still holds this. And it doesn't mean that it's, the phrase, all feelings are valid, not all feelings are true. So I have to work with my mind and really work with myself there and say, you're not lonely, you're not alone, you have these connections. But that might be something that's always in me. That might be something that is always a monkey on my back, that I just will feel that way. And I've learned to not accept that feeling as truth, because the reality is now I prioritize connections in my life. I do make friends. And if I ever feel that, I also wonder, I'm like, is there more connection that I need? Do I need to open up to my friends more? Are there things that I need support in that I'm not asking for, So I think working with the feeling of loneliness, there's things we can do. There's ways we can show up. Pardon me, I have the burps. There's ways we can show up to help ourselves and to help create these things in our lives. But we also have to do the internal work to understand ourselves and to really understand, what is that thing? What do I need more from others? What do I need to ask for? And really working with the deeper beliefs around, how do I let connection in my life? Am I available for the connection that I want? And what are the ways I'm keeping myself from that connection? I particularly love talking about friendship because I have had such deep wounds there. I've had such deep, I had this belief for so long that I'm never going to have true friends. I'm always going to be lonely. I don't need anyone but myself. And I've learned how untrue that is. I'm not a huge social, I say, I'm trained in these connection tools. I'm a trained connection coach. I'm trained in leading games. I don't love the label of connection coach, but I am trained in that and qualified to do that. I don't necessarily think because you are qualified in that I'm not the most popular person. I don't have a million friends. I'm not always the life of the party. Very rarely, actually. I'm not the most talkative and a lot of the time I keep to myself, or I observe. The difference now in my life is that I'm intentional with the connections that I have. I'm intentional when I do want connection and how I show up with people, whether it's, a parasocial acquaintances, if it's people, I'm a little close with versus my inner circle of 5-6 people that I'm very close with. I'm intentional and aware of how I'm showing up in those connections. And I feel like I have a choice now. I feel like I can choose how I show up. The connection that I want. If I desire something more, I feel like I know how to show up to allow that process to happen. I don't hide anymore, and I don't block myself anymore. So I think having these tools, it doesn't mean you have to show up and be the loudest in the room, the life of the party, to have a million friends. It's really about understanding the kind of connection you want more in your life and how to get that. If you have 1-2 super close friends and you are satisfied with that, that's great. Whatever it takes. If you do one social event a month and you really enjoy that social event, that's great. I'm more of, a loner. And the interesting thing now is that my friends, my close friends, they all, most of them, I would say, function in a similar manner. They also have friends and connections, but they're also kind of independent, kind of do their own thing, go their own way, and it doesn't mean that we don't have connection and we don't know how to show up with each other. But we may go weeks sometimes without seeing each other, but we check in with each other. And then when we connect, it's like we have this depth, this soul level connection. And I know how to have that now. I didn't know how to have that before. And I really had to look at, how I was preventing myself from that. I had to learn to say my real feelings. I had to learn to express my pain and vulnerability with other people. I had to learn how to show them, let them in and say, hey, I actually feel really depressed sometimes. And, I remember starting to write messages to people and say like, hey, I'm sorry if I've been a little quiet the past couple weeks. I'm really struggling right now. I'm in a depressive episode. This is what's going on. I just want y'all to know that I miss you, and I wanted to check in and let you know this. And it's like something like that, and it's been received amazingly well, and people are like, thank you for letting us know. And because the reality is, people, we don't always know what each other is going through. We're not mind readers. And even, when we think the best of our close friends, and we're like, oh, they're doing good, they're working, they're busy, we don't always know how each other is actually doing. And that's something that we need to make known to the people close to us in our lives. We need to show up and just say, hey, and I think this is where a lot of people have wounding, and they have where they block themselves, is when we say like, hey, nobody like shows up for me, or nobody has been asking how I'm doing. I've been going through this hard time and I feel really alone. And I think that when we're going through those hard times and we feel alone, we have the opportunity to invite others into that experience with us. And that's why we cultivate those people who are like, hey, these are people who I can be honest with, I can show up with no matter what. They accept me how I am. I can say where I'm at, they understand. And I think that those connections are extremely valuable. So cultivating those kind of relationships it can be a lifeline. It can be like, this is the connection that I want. I have these people in my life. It doesn't mean I have to be like good time Sally all the time and show up, a certain way. You don't have to show up enthusiastic all the time. You can show up feeling like crap, as long as you have people in your life who can understand that and hold that space for you. Like I said, I struggle with mental health and emotional ups and downs. I have some friends who do as well. And there's times we don't talk to each other, and we don't talk as much, or we say, hey, I don't have the capacity to hang out. Can we have a phone call, or can we just text, or can we go on a walk, And so really learning to ask for what you need from your friends and make known your reality is super important. I think all of these things contribute to us feeling more seen and less alone, and feeling more connected to other people. And we have to look at ourselves first. We have to look at ourselves and be honest with ourselves and say, hey, what do I want more of? How am I keeping myself from it? And what else can I invite into my life? So I would encourage you to ask yourself, say like, am I satisfied with the connection I have in my life? If I feel lonely, what needs to be explored here? What do I need to explore within myself? How do I need to show up for myself first? Make a list of your desires. We used to do this in the community house. It's a very practical, simple practice. You take 10 minutes, you write out what you want in life. Just, I desire this, I desire this, I desire this. And a lot of things will come up, and it can be the smallest things. It could be, I desire a lemon cupcake, or I desire to have a friend to do bowling with, regularly, or whatever it is. Like, just list out all your desires, because we're getting in touch with ourselves. We're getting in touch with what's alive within us, and we're waking that up. You can do that. You can, that can help process what's inside of you. And then we can start taking action on those things. Always highly recommend therapy, because therapy is amazing for reflecting and learning more about yourself, because I feel like we need to understand ourselves first, and then we can really understand how we show up in connections and how those connections are in our lives. So I love this topic. I appreciate you listening. I want you to know that if you're feeling lonely, you don't have to be alone, and the feeling of loneliness does not always mean you are alone. And life doesn't have to stay that way. I used to feel really hopeless, and I used to feel really isolated, and I still have days where I do. I still have times where I do, and I work with myself. I do self-care, or I now have the tools to invite people into that experience with me. So don't give up if you feel that way. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of ways we can improve our lives and help ourselves heal. So I hope you've gotten a lot from this episode, and thank you for listening. My name is Esty, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.